Okay, just let me clarify for a second. ABRA endorsement is separate. Because you get an ABRA endorsement, you get approved through ABRA. That's great. That doesn't mean you get a sports wagering
Right.
license from the OLG.
But you don't need this.
They're two separate processes.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, you have to have an ABRA endorsement in
Right.
order to, but that's based on your alcohol license, etc. We have a separate process, so anybody coming through who wants a sports license will get vetted for that process separately.
Sorry, so,
You can say okay, but you could give, you know, the
Right.
okay here, and
Endorsement.
get the endorsement, but that doesn't guarantee that a sports wagering license
Right.
will be granted to that
Right,
location.
doesn't guarantee
They might not
it.
pass a background, there could be a bunch of
Okay,
other
so you-
issues.
so what are the two different, like, just to help me clarify, two different names of these licenses we're working with? We have one, the establishment's license, that's the sport, what'd you say was sports wagering license?
The endorsement, the ABRA endorsement.
So
And
there's the
that's-
ABRA endorsement,
Endorsement is
ABRA
one.
and
endorsement.
then there's the sports wagering license. So
Totally
somebody
different
who's
application.
interested could come through the OLG, go through the process to see if they qualify for a sports wagering license through the Office of Lottery and Gaming.
Yeah, but the OLG license is the operator's, not the establishment's license.
No, no.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
not understanding
yeah.
what the operator has versus what the establishment has.
I think we're just confusing it. So here today, I think that these establishments are before you because it's about an ABRA endorsement.
Yes,
Right.
Okay,
yes.
so you have to decide whether that's something you want or not. We have a separate process for sports wagering. So it sounds like they're interested in sports wagering, they'll have to come through our establishment, fill out applications, and apply for sports wagering license. They may or may not get that, depending on what the outcome of our process is.
Okay, but again, to clarify, the wagering license
Uh-huh.
is a license that is granted to the operator rather than the establishment, or is there also an establishment license?
So it depends, again, everybody's coming through differently.
If there's a lease arrangement,
If there is a lease arrangement, it depends what that arrangement is. So it's hard to
So in-
explain it.
so in some
I
instances,
can't
the-
predict, this application
Yes.
has not come before us, so I cannot answer
yeah,
specific
so in
questions.
some instances, the establishment will have a gaming license. In other instances, the gaming license will be the operator's license. Correct?
It depends.
No, I'm saying that those are two different.
That's just two scenarios, there could be many more, I guess is what I'm trying to say, I don't wanna limit us to two.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Everyone's coming in
we're just gonna
different.
take one more question from the audience, and then we're gonna vote about the two establishments.
What you got?
The community good
Yeah.
standing. You know, with all of this said and done, I'm looking at the safety of the community. Do the establishments that apply for license, do we get to say that these are good, safe establishments? That they, on a normal basis, don't have people falling in the street, they don't have crime, that they in fact are healthy and vibrant for our community? Because ultimately, that's the ultimate price we pay when you put it in there. If you give somebody who's got a bad reputation, a license to do this, it's only gonna get worse.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at that opportunity right now.
So I own Shaw's and Silo, and I think we would like to clarify a little bit from our position.
I think you're up next.
I know, but they said they were gonna vote.
No,
so
we're
I-
gonna
No,
keep on
we're
talking.
gonna hear you
Okay,
guys.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
any more questions
Well,
for the
I just
DC
wanna-
government?
In terms of the second license, can like 7-Eleven get a license?
Yeah, if they wanted to.
Okay.
They have the financial means and they could pass the strict background and in-depth background.
So there's the only.
Again, it's a franchise, so it depends who the owner is and what their intent is. We have to get we have to get that information and assess it within the OLG and make a determination.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then only the alcohol establishments have this.
Get a license.
Right, so the alcohol establishment only have the ABRA requirement.
All right, so why don't we have the establishments come up,
Yeah.
Silo and Shaw's, thank you.
You want us to?
Just hand them over.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Give me
go
the sidebar.
Maybe we should have done that from the start.
Sidebar. I'm so glad you guys came, hooray. Many questions, I knew there would be. Okay.
So this will make your job a little easier.
Okay, so
Maybe.
you're representing both establishments?
Yes, I'm an owner of Shaw's and Silo, and Frank is a
So
partner.
say your names.
Eric Heidenberger,
And Frank Wilson.
Okay.
and
very
Frank Wilson, before he became a partner, also has a background in sports wagering, which kind of helps us.
Okay.
So just to clarify from what we're applying for and how we see that being an opportunity for our businesses, we do not want any physical kiosks on site, and we do not want any cash exchanged on site. We've actually had gaming providers come in, and it sounds like right now for gaming, so if you wanted to play a video game, you get a return for money. That right now there is cash exchanged. We're not talking about doing any of that. But for us, we are gonna be partnering with a third party, and right now I think there are about 30 businesses that have joined up and are partnering with a firm that's representing all the locations. And it's gonna be an app like DraftKings, if people are familiar with that. That would be what would be approved for a customer to come in with their phone through the geo-fencing, would come into our location, be able to place a bet, and then they would get their return directly from whoever is managing the DraftKings app. We would get a small percentage of whatever that return is to the DraftKings, but nothing would be exchanged on site from us, from customer to owner. And Frank can explain a little bit more of the partnership that we have with the law firm who is representing there's 30 or so businesses and what that potentially will look like once that all gets put together.
Yeah, so like the financials of it probably don't make sense for an individual bar to say, okay, I want to become an operator, right? So what this group in DC is doing is they're putting together a group of bars that would like to be able to take advantage of this potential revenue stream, and is also working with a gambling provider, like a William Hill or a DraftKings. We haven't determined who that is going to be yet, but it will be one of the big names that everyone is familiar with, that has tons of experience and operates across the country. And essentially what it will allow for us to do is we won't be taking any risk as the establishment in terms of like the question earlier about like, you know, how like the betting limits and things like that. All of that is handled by our third-party gaming operator. They're also taking all of the risk. So we make money if we win. If we don't win, we have nothing to lose. And in terms of the operations, I don't think, you know, from the establishment's point of view, you're not going to see anything different. Like the lottery was discussing, essentially it just means that if you walk into one of our locations, you'll be allowed to place a bet through whoever is the provider that we partner with. And the company GeoComply, I know there were some questions about the geofencing aspect. GeoComply is likely the name of the company that we'll be using with our partner to do the geofencing, and they have global experience doing this. You know, you can go to their website and look at the technology that they use, but they can get down to, let's say we were in the basement of a larger building, they can know whether you're in that space or elsewhere in the building. So it's very tight, very regulated. It's what they use in states like New Jersey, where you can bet if you step across the state line, but you can't bet if you're, you know, a block away in another state. And so that's kind of the technical side of it. But the most important thing to understand is that from our standpoint as operators, we don't want to see and we don't foresee a change in our daily business. Like just because we're going to start operating this, I don't think anybody's going to be noticing like a sudden change in what Shaw's Tavern is or what Silo is in the neighborhood. This is the kind of activity that, you know, with the lottery app, people will be able to walk around the city and place bets on their phones anyways. This is just an outlet for us to increase our revenues, which is important in the restaurant business because as you saw this past year, there were like 120 restaurant closures in DC, so we need to have every advantage we can.
Okay, so I'm curious if Michael and Alex, Marriott, what are your constituents said? Any feedback?
Well,
When I talked to the establishment, I just wanted to know if there were kiosks in Shaw's, particularly Shaw's. I went to Shaw's Tavern and asked them.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I remember we emailed back and
Oh,
forth.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just.
yeah, we don't want to have any kiosks.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, and we don't have those on site. And I think the main thing is we respect what Shaw's Tavern is, we respect what Silo is, and it's a neighborhood spot where people come in. We don't want it to change our operations where we're drawing in a different crowd than what we already have. And to be honest, there's people that are already coming in, they're placing bets illegally on third-party sites, offshore, different apps. It's already happening. So I think this is a great way for the city to generate more income and for businesses to share in that. But there is, as Frank said, you could be on your DC Lottery app and place a bet anywhere. Like you could be in your apartment, you could go to any bar that's not an approved location and place that bet. This is a way to be with a larger name, like a DraftKings. People are more familiar with that, they already have it on their phone. This would allow them to come into our location and have some sort of revenue share with the businesses, and Alex mentioned be something that would help local businesses.
And the incentive for the consumer to bet, like, with a provider like the ones that we bring to the table versus the lottery, is it's likely the odds on the lottery app, which is standard in most states, are gonna be markedly different from what market rate odds are on games. That's just, I don't know if that's gonna play out exactly like that, but it typically does play out that way, so. And then there's also the brand familiarity and things like that, you know, a provider like DraftKings or William Hill would bring to the table.
So Alex, did you get any feedback from your constituents?
Yeah, we've, you know, went through a long protracted discussion with the local residents at 555 Mass, and Silo's been extremely open and very helpful. I had a long conversation with Eric, where he was desperately trying to walk me through this process. And I guess my question is, and I'm still a little hazy on this license, is right now you're just seeking an endorsement from ABRA for your license, saying that you are an establishment that would permit this geofence to allow whatever to people to place bets. You yourselves aren't seeking a license to become an operator or a book.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And again, this doesn't really have too much to do with Silo or Shaw's Tavern, but these 30 bars that are getting together with a law firm, is that an idea where you'll get together and create like an entity that would be an operator?
No, essentially, by linking the 30 locations together, we would have the level of foot traffic that a large corporation like William Hill or DraftKings would be interested in from the standpoint of a business relationship and partnership.
Now, is this
So-
because, like, you know, at this, they're saying how only, you know, this opened up early December and nobody's applying for this?
So people have applied with ABRA, but I don't think anyone's completed an application.
I see. So this is the first
With all
phase to
the-
say to someone like DraftKings, hey, listen, there are 30 of us, have this endorsement, you can set up, you know, an application system in our 30 bars?
Yeah, so we would partner with them, like we would make a business partnership with them as a network, and then they would go and apply to the lottery for the license with the exact plan of how we would operate in that network. And so yeah, so the purpose of linking all of us together is to basically give us negotiating power with the operator, and then the operator would be the one that would be leading the charge along with the lawyer that's representing the bars in terms of putting a single application together for this concept.
Okay, and I really apologize for how dense I am on this. Can you explain to me the difference between the license that an operator like DraftKings would need to obtain from DC and the license that you?
It would be, if we as a bar individually wanted to go and get that license, we would have to, and correct me if I'm wrong on the stats, but it's like a $500,000 bond we'd have to post. The cost of the license itself is like $50,000 or $100,000. We would have to prove that we have the cash flow to be able to handle the bets, the know-how to be able to operate a sports book, which we're not doing. We're not standing here in front of you saying, I'm gonna start operating a sports book. We're saying, we can bring in William Hill to operate a sports book, and we can be that local partner that is able to kind of take a part in the potential upside of the revenue from that. And I think that's the purpose of the licenses, is to be able to give small businesses in DC a chance to take part in this new dynamic.
You don't pay out, the operator pays out.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're providing foot traffic for the operator.
All the
Okay.
customer interaction is gonna be between them and whatever app it is that we partner with.
Right.
It'll be all through them. So they'll have customer service on the app, like it's the same as if you walked into New Jersey and placed a bet on DraftKings. It'll be the same thing, you know, it'll be the same app, basically.
I get, you're providing foot traffic, so the 30
Correct.
of you are linked together, you're providing foot traffic, and you provide more revenue for the operator and for you.
Correct.
Okay.
And the only examples I think that exist of that are like Cap One Arena and the stadiums. They're the ones that are actually gonna be setting up a book in their arena, correct? And I think that's the only example where that exists and that has been approved. But I don't know of any locations that are
But they're
actually
big,
gonna.
they're
Yeah.
not, so yeah, they have the capital to pay out,
And,
okay.
and there's a 2-block radius where they have a hold on that neighborhood,
Right.
and no other establishments would be approved within that.
Yeah, they have.
That's interesting.
So the extent, once this is all developed, you and the 30 bars won't have a license, you will just simply have an endorsement from ABRA, and this DraftKings will have the operating license. Or William Hill,
Right,
whoever
or
the
it'd be
operator
like
is.
a joint venture that gets created,
Okay.
with that
And in
partner,
which
and then
case
the
then
joint
you would
venture
need that
then,
license.
then gets the license.
Okay.
And I think that's where we were at the end of that conversation, is the difference between the operator and the
The
establishment.
establishment. All right.
And would we have to go back in front of making an application? We would be partnering with those other locations within this law firm to file as an applicant with them.
I see, I see.
Okay, any
All
more
right, I think
questions from the
it's on-
commissioners?
Yes, so, the investigator, mentioned that, there would be, some staff person that would be responsible, a manager for that activity physically on the premises. Now, is that an employee of yours, an employee of the operator, of the entity, who's?
I don't know if you
employee
have clarity if what we're talking about, that would be required. If we're not having any cash exchange on site, or not gonna be liable for issuing the payouts, if that would be required. But I mean, obviously it'd be something that, we foresee ABRA regulating this in terms of making sure you have an ABC licensed manager on duty, all your permitting, up, but we would train our staff, but I don't think there's gonna be anything to the point of interfering with people on how they're getting paid out, since nothing would be coming from the
So,
establishment.
no, what I heard was that there would be customer service in terms of any issues related to the use of the app, et cetera. And so I'm seeing nods. So again, whose employee would that be?
I just think that, once we have that meeting with whether it's the William Hill, the DraftKings, or wherever the operator is, we're gonna establish those boundaries. And
So at this point, it's not defined.
so most likely, it's in our regs that you have to have security, on staff to answer to any of the sports book related questions. So
Yeah.
most likely, certainly they would have to have somebody on staff who's able to answer to that sports book.
Again, we haven't seen anything.
Right, so you
Yeah.
don't know what their plan is.
Okay, any other questions from the
So,
commissioners?
so back to Eric and Frank, so, what is your proposal for how you're gonna handle that? Is it going to be your employee, or is it gonna be someone else's employee?
I think that would ultimately depend on the type of relationship that we put together through this joint venture with our partner. It could end up being our employees, it could end up being theirs, but obviously if we're going to be granted the license from the Lottery Commission, we're gonna have to have that security person on site. So I think that'll come down to a business decision, but ultimately, like, we plan on complying with all of the regulations. Like, we have no interest in not doing that. So, I mean, we'll essentially work with the lottery through our application to make sure that we have everything, like, we meet all of the requirements.
So back to the lottery, potentially, depending on the size of the establishment, there might be a separate security person and a separate manager, or or in some cases, might that be one person?
There are requirements, again, in our rules and regulations for what it has to be. This is a different option here, so I can't really answer your question, but again, we've got a frequently asked question. I'm not avoiding it, I don't know the proposed plan, we haven't seen it yet. Okay, so, again, there are security requirements, it could be cameras, it could be physical, that has to get worked out. That makes sense.
So you're saying, trust us,
No, I'm not saying trust us, I'm saying there's a statute and there are rules and regulations, and again, we have a frequently asked question sheet, everybody here can read everything that is required from us in order to apply to, for a license, and we have got to deem you suitable, and there's a whole process involved here, but I want to let people know that this is available on our website. We're going to give you the documents on so you can read it, and you can see all the things that we require. This isn't willy-nilly, except this is a different model, and so I don't know how to answer the questions, so they haven't come forth. They haven't come to a pre-app meeting. They haven't come to us yet. I don't know when. They're still forming a joint venture. It sounds like they're still forming their business. I can't answer that for them, but there are security requirements that the OLG has.
You might have spoken with Jeff Ifra, he's the lawyer that's representing Bet DC.
I believe some colleagues have, I have not.
So
I'm
he's the group
representing
that we're part of, so,
Okay, so due to time, we're gonna take one question from the audience, and there she is right there.
Should you be successful in securing your application, will costs, fees be trickled down to patrons to help supplement your effort here? Will we see an increase in cocktails and appetizer costs?
No, we have a very price-conscious clientele that comes in. With the partnering with the other establishments and going with a third-party vendor like a DraftKings, the cost for an application would be covered by the third
Yeah,
party.
Essentially, it's not gonna cost us hardly anything to do this. And it's a potential revenue stream that allows us to potentially stay in business and
We just don't wanna see price gouging and
Yeah.
What,
chicken wings being.
what's your timeline?
So I think the Abra license, we have what?
No, I mean like yours, like when you plan to implement it, like, you know, this kind of thing.
I think right now, those discussions are being had between Jeff, who represents the group, and the lottery in terms of trying to figure out exactly how we're going to make this application to them. We're looking at this as a first step of being like, hey, Abra, will you give us the endorsement to do something along these lines? Which, I mean, there's not much that's gonna change. All we're asking for is the ability to be granted the license through the lottery and perhaps to have people in our venue placing bets through a mobile application. And then we work with the group and with the lottery to get that application through. I don't know what that timeline looks like.
When you say license through the, what license are you talking about? Are you talking about
It's a
the
Class B
endorsement?
license.
Class B
right?
license.
But you're not getting the Class B license?
No, the
The
group
management
or-
service provider.
The group or the partner would, okay.
Okay, so I'll do one more, because I know Lucy hasn't had her, do two more and that's it.
Okay, so
No.
quickly, if someone is not endorsed, can they still be approved with the licensing over here? That's my question. If the ANC, if the APRA does not give the endorsement, can they still be approved with
No.
the actual licensing?
As a lic,
If you're serving alcoholic beverages, you need the sports wagering endorsement. If you
Correct.
want to go ahead and apply, right?
Correct.
Because
So we
that
need
is
that
an
endorsement.
ABRA requirement that's related to the alcohol beverage licensing process, et cetera. Again, just because you get that, that does not mean you're gonna pass through our process.
Right.
But yes, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
But if the business is not regulated by ABRA, because they don't serve alcohol, then they go directly to your agency.
Correct.
7-Eleven.
Yep.
Okay.
7-Eleven,
My
right?
question was related, I mean, if the star of the neighborhood suddenly becomes a den of iniquity, what is the recourse of our commissioners?
Well, you know, as a business owner, we want to do everything that's like best for our business. If it's something that's going to negatively impact our operations in the neighborhood, it's not something that we're going to offer.
But the
I mean,
only
this would
recourse,
come up like, just like any other part of their license. If they had an entertainment endorsement and they were goofing off and we didn't like it, they gotta come to us for a renewal. We could protest it and try to knock it off their license.
so it would be 2 years before it would come back up to the commission.
That's what it sounds like.
And again, but I don't think there's like the DC Lottery app can be used anywhere. And I think, I don't foresee this being like the amount of volume that we're kind of putting in our mind that this is
We're
gonna.
not Vegas.
Yeah, it's not gonna draw in a whole different crowd. I think it's people that are already coming, and it's just a way for businesses to kind of share in the income. You know, I think everything now is, there's so much that people don't know what this is all gonna end up looking like. But if I know Abra, I'm sure they would be willing to step in and regulate this more if need be.
So I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, great, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that the ANC offer support for Shaw's Tavern to add sports wagering to its operations.
Seconded.
All-
What, actually, friendly amendment, specifically that we support the application for the substantial change that would grant the endorsement for sports wagering.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You know, did you accept the friendly amendment? I didn't hear if you accepted it.
What was wrong with the first one thing I said?
Specifically the language of the application.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, all in favor?
Alex?
You know, this has nothing to do with the vote, but we can take the vote.
Okay.
Aye.
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 Alan, nay from Frank? Ken?
I'll say nay.
Okay, so 2 nays and 5 yeas, okay. All right.
Before I make my motion, I was wondering, I know it's kind of a pain to keep coming to these meetings. Would you agree to continue to kind of keep us in the loop and come to these meetings and keeping us of what's going on, how things are developing,
For sure.
since this is a new process? I mean, everything I've heard, it doesn't seem, my only concern, you know, and I have some constituents here, is noise, that's
Yeah.
it. You know, I mean, if this, like, gambling is certainly, you know, has its negative associations, but it doesn't seem like this is going to affect the peace, order, and quiet, so I really don't have any issue with it at all. But I would appreciate if you guys would come and keep us in the loop.
Absolutely.
And just for the record, the ABC licensing committee did hear, you know, presentation by the legal counsel for the two establishments, and after some significant questioning, we determined that there wouldn't be any externalities, any negative impacts related to peace, order, and quiet. And the committee did recommend that the commission approve the request with substantial changes.
Okay. Well, with that, I'd like to make a motion, the ANC 6E support the substantial change to Silo's Class C tavern license?
Yes.
And that be communicated to to Abra.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Frank? Nick? Kevin?
Meg.
Okay, great, 5 to 2. All right, okay, thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you for the
Here you
good
go,
questions.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, so we have Wilburger Street, the symbolic street naming.
No, I mean, it's coming. It's new, so we needed to take some time.
Presentation, Mila, right?
Yes.
Right, so. Okay, everyone, yep. Okay, this is Mila Moss.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I bring you greetings from Miss Tina Boyd and regrets from Miss Tina Boyd. She is unable to be with us this evening. She is under the weather today. But my name is Mila Moss. I'm former chair of ANC 1B and former chair of Howard Theater. And I am here today as an honor and a privilege on behalf of Tina Boyd to ask for this commission's support.
Excuse me, guys, can you move conversations out in the hallway just so we can hear the people presenting? Thank you so much.
I am here on behalf of Ms. Tina Boyd before this commission to request symbolic name designation for Wiltberger Street, and in honor of Miss Cecilia Penny Scott. Miss Cecilia Penny Scott is Tina's mom. She founded the Hospitality House, which provided housing and services for needy families. She founded School Shoes, which collected shoes and sweaters for children. She organized a boycott against Anheuser-Busch because Anheuser-Busch did not provide licenses to minorities, nor did they hire minorities. She was one of the first black women in D.C. to establish a real estate development organization. So this is a woman who was proactive in her community. She was an advisory person on the United Bank. She stood strong in this community, but most importantly, the jewel in her crown was her being the owner of a place called Cecilia's. Cecilia's was directly across the street from the Howard Theater, and it served as a celebrated night spot for the who's who of Washington, both politically and athletically. But let me stop and say, this is Mr. Boyd, Tina's husband, who is a wonderful gentleman, and knew Mrs. Boyd, loved Mrs. Boyd, and you can jump in a second. But at any rate, Cecilia served as a place for African American entertainers because DC at that time was segregated, and there was no place for them to stay after their performance at the Howard Theater. So she had a good cook, and she had the who's who. And as we see our city grow, and as we see a new renaissance, we still must continue to respect and acknowledge the legacy of those who were pillars in the community in Shaw. And Miss Cecilia Scott was in fact that person. And you have handouts that gives you a little bit of history. But we have been working with Commissioners Brown and Padro on this matter. We have met with Councilmember Charles Allen and Councilwoman Brianne Nadeau, both of whom have agreed to introduce legislation to support the symbolic name change of Wiltberger Street to Cecilia's Way.
And a clarification, it
Yes.
won't be a change of Wilburger Street.
Right.
Wilburger Street will still be the street name,
Right.
but there will be a ceremonial sign put under Wilburger Street for Cecilia.
That's correct.
That's
So
very
that's what I mean.
specific.
That's what I mean by symbolic name designation. Exactly right, Harrison. That's exactly right. So we are asking the commission to support our efforts to get the.
In the community.
And the community, absolutely. And if any of you live on Wiltberger Street, we have a petition that you can sign because that is the prerequisite, part of the prerequisite for this process. Ms. Boyd and I did in fact go and knock on doors on Wiltberger Street and left materials for folks to know what this is all about. And so we'll have the signatures and provide them to the commissioners. And should we get the support from you guys, we would be most grateful and appreciative.
Michael, any feedback from your?
Would you like to,
I'm
any questions?
now the oldest person that lives on Wilburger Street, and I am the longest resident on Wilburger Street now, which is very upsetting, because I used to drink in the back bar at Cecilia's, that large Formica bar in the back. The only request that I would have is that we, on the south side of Wilburger, we need a street sign, which we don't have. So there's no way to put the
name on that sign.
The name on that sign, because we lost our sign a number of years ago. We've never gotten one back. So
Sure.
this will at least ensure that we'll have a sign on the south end of the street.
Absolutely. We will make sure that Alex and Commissioner Brown, that we will work with DDOT to ensure that signage is placed on the south side of the street.
Question, I'm not against the proposal, but where did the Wiltberger name come from?
Mr. Wiltberger owned real estate, and because he owned so much land, the community just simply named it after him. He, at the time, Grover Cleveland was the president when Mr. Wiltberger was a real estate mogul, and he was appointed by President Grover Cleveland as a notary. And at that time, the president had to give you that job. Who knew, right? So that's who Mr. Wiltberger is. We did some research on that very thing, Commissioner, so that we could be sure that we weren't rocking the boat for someone else's legacy.
And how many years did he precede Cecilia's Way?
Oh, this was in
Cecilia and her
18.
restaurant.
Well, Mrs. Oh my God, Mrs. Scott. She opened up Cecilia's Way in 1958, and it went dark after the riots. So there's some time between